Right, gonna wait for a few minutes now. I'll start sharing my screen. Share screen. There we go. Can you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. There you go, we got one. All right, now I can hear, right? You need to speak. I did you already, look. Make your revoke host, you are co-host. Okay. All right, let's start. Okay, right. Cool, okay. Welcome everyone. In today's webinar, we are going to learn more in depth about MCP. We're going to learn about ways to protect our MCP servers. And we're also going to have a deep dive into MCP primitives. So there are quite a few things that we need to cover. So let's get started. Right, the first one, what is MCP? Now, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It is a protocol that gives AI the tools it needs to perform API calls, to read data from files, DB, etc. Why is it so important for any business? It gives the AI the tools to operate on its own and to fetch and learn data from within an organization that without it couldn't. We need to have a couple of available MCP transports. So there's a few ways we can implement MCPs, and we should be aware of them. Reason for that is when we add MCPs, and when we add MCP, we need to know what type of MCP we should create and for what specification. So the first one is streamable HTTP server transport. This one is recommended for production. This is the latest version that everyone is using. SSC server transport is deprecated, is no longer supported. So if you ever prompt your Copilot to start building an MCP and starts doing an SSC server transport one, you know you're on the wrong track. And then the last one is STDO server transport. This one is only built for local. So this MCP with this transport will only work on local host. And I've researched a bit into it. Why would people build something that will only work on localhost? The idea is apparently if you don't host an MCP server, you can just create a script that will spin up an MCP on a local machine and have it work that way. For me, it was never the scenario, but it's an option that we should be aware of. Okay. Now, as with anything, we need to learn how this MCP works. We need to understand how it works. So I created a few diagrams on the flow of the MCP. So they're quite large, and I had to create a separate diagram and post it in the GitHub repo. So let me bring it up. Okay, right. So the first MCP flow is the one without authentication. So this is just an MCP server that doesn't require any authentication. Now, what do we have? So we have the three participants. We have the MCP host, which is Visual Studio Code. I'm working on Visual Studio Code, but you can have any other clients. Then we have the MCP client. So Visual Studio Code can host multiple clients. And then we have the MCP server. This is the one that we build. Now, the process is when you add an MCP into Visual Studio Code, there's an initialization phase. What this does is your MCP client will make an initialize request to your server. The server will get back to the client, and then the client will say, okay, I got your notification, I'm all initialized, I'm ready to go. The second step is, okay, now we're going to discover the tools. So what tools does my MCP server provide me? So it's going to make a post to get the list, the tools list, and the MCP server is going to return a list of tools, prompts, resources. So we'll see all the MCP primitives. So it's going to return a list of what the MCP can do. And then the third part is the user interaction. So user asks, for example, I have an MCP server that returns a list of products. The user says, okay, get me all products. And the host is going to identify which tool needs to be used. And then the client is going to know which API call to make in order to fetch the data. And that's how the MCP server responds back to the client. So it's pretty straightforward. Only gotcha point is the initialization phase. This is, I think, the most important part. Now, this is without OAuth. Okay, so now let's do a little bit of demo and show you how to add, if you've never worked with MCP in Visual Studio Code, how to add an MCP server, and then we'll look at the authentication part. All right, so this is our Visual Studio Code. In Visual Studio Code, so first I will start the API and the server. So I have a script here that does this automatically. Okay, it just started. All right, so we're starting the API and we're starting the MCP server. Just wait a few seconds. All right, so our MCP server is available at this endpoint. Let's just grab the endpoint and so to add a new server, MCP client, sorry, in Visual Studio Code, you have to press Ctrl-Shift-P on Windows. I don't remember the Mac options, but it's something similar. And then you're going to see MCP add server. You're going to click this option, and this is why it's important to know which options to use. So we have the STDO, and we also have the HTTP. So we build an HTTP MCP server. We're going to choose this one. And then we press the endpoint, and then so my MCP server calls an API that provides operations on products. It just does post CRUD operations on products. So I'm just going to call it product-local. All right, so we press enter. What do we want, global or just available for this workspace? I usually choose global. Right, so next, authentication part. We have this beautiful pop-up here. Let's label this for now. And let's have a look at the diagram with authentication. Right, so with OAuth key clock, there's few extra steps when we build a server that requires authentication. So our MCP server is protected. So first, the MCP client will make a get request to the MCP server. The MCP server will return the auth metadata, and then will prompt the user to authorize. It's just literally just what we saw here. And then once we hit the authorization endpoint, it's gonna make another get request to the server, and then the server will redirect to key clock, and the key clock will display the user interface of the website where we have to log in and then redirect back to Visual Studio Code. And then the client can request a token, get the token from key clock, and store the token. And then all subsequent requests are using a bearer token. So these are the few steps beforehand before we can access the MCP server. Now, there's two very, very important things to be aware of when it comes to authentication. So you can build an MCP server without dynamic client registration, and you can build an MCP server with dynamic client registration. And there's two distinct things. Let's have a look on how this works and why is it important. So if we go back to our server, and so I have some cache. Let me delete my MCP cache, remove. All right, so this is the one we just added. Let's start it. And I think I just need to restart my key clock 1 second because it's not doing what I'm expecting it to do. So in key clock, we have, let's let it to load. So we ready? Yep. Continue. Let me just check a configuration in key clock that turns the DCR on and off. Should work. All right, there you go. So we have our clients, client registration, trusted hosts. That's why. Save. All right. And then do this again. And we delete the cache. I thought I deleted that. That's okay. All right. And let's start this again just to be safe. Cool. One second, MCP server is restarting. Great. Okay, so let's restart this one. Good. All right. So this is what I was looking for. What I've just done is in key clock, there is the setting where when you are the trusted host, it automatically enables the option of DCR, which I've accidentally left it on. If you remove the trusted host, the DCR is disabled. Right. So now the dynamic client registration says, no, it's not supported. Your OAuth provider doesn't support it. Do you want to proceed by manually providing the client registration, which is client ID? And you say, yep, let's proceed. Right. So now the user has to enter client ID. And I have one here. And then the user, it says it's optional to enter client secret. The reality is it's not. I've tried without client secret and it didn't work. So we're just gonna quickly grab the client secret, which I already have saved. Second. And this one. Credentials, client secret. Okay, so adding the client secret. Cool. And now it proceeds to the MCP server. Wants to authenticate to the product MCP server. You say, yeah, go for it. And then that's it. We're signed in. All right. So now if we have a look at, now we can see we have 5 tools. You can see we have 1 prompt, which we're gonna learn about shortly. And you can also go in more, you can see output of the server. So we can see a couple of attempts to initialize the request while waiting. I was waiting for me to do the authentication. Okay, so this is without DCR. Now, if we enable DCR, you'll see there's a different user experience. So we go back to key clock and we go to clients, client registration, trusted hosts, and we say, yeah, trust my local host. And then we're going to restart Docker. Okay. And then I have a different browser windows. All right, terminal, and then we start. All right, so we have a different type of MCP server called dynamic MCP. We're just waiting for it to start. Nice, okay. Right, let's just delete the cache in case. Okay, this one. Okay. Right. Double check. Cool. Okay. So now we're going to restart this. And what happened? Restart. Start. Okay. This one is one. Yes, this is the wrong one. So cool. All right. So you can see it automatically. Yeah. So it automatically bypassed that initial dynamic client registration pop-up. It automatically registers on client directly on key clock, and all you have to do is click allow. So the user all has to do click allow and say grant access to Visual Studio Code. Yep, go for it. And then that's it. It's all done. And if we have a look at key clock, I have several clients that have been automatically already created through me doing lots of trials. So this is what dynamic client registration means, and this is why it's important for the user experience to, it's a lot more smooth, and the user doesn't have to know about any client ID or client secret. Okay, right. So going back to our presentation, the next part we are going to present is right, demo time with MCP primitives. So MCP comes with quite a few, they call it primitives, let's say tools. But most of the times people use MCP tools, and that's what I do as well. But I've learned that there's other primitives that they offer and quite important. So it was really good doing this presentation, make me think about quite a few things. All right, so let's start with tools. So we're going to do a small demo to add the product. And the second demo, which is really interesting, we're going to use a Atlassian MCP that will automatically fix a bug reported in Jira board. So that's I think the cool one. Okay, so let me, I just want to stop this. And I want to start this one. Okay, and this one is waiting for it to start. The reason why I'm stopping the dynamic one is I have a bug in the dynamic one, which I wasn't able to fix in time. All right, so let's start this. Okay, and we're good to go. Right, we have our MCP up and running. We can check here if we're actually using it. So our MCP is called product-local. You can see it here, it's enabled for our AI. And we have a couple of tools, which is browse, create product, get products, update product. Okay. So let's say I want to use, it's called product-local. And I want to say add ASOS, let's say $300, at least $300 on i7 and fairly used. Fairly used. All right, let's see what this does. Okay, right. So it's figuring out which method to call, which is create product, and then description. I7 possibly use condition, exactly what I passed in. And I click allow. And then, yep, product registered successfully. And then if I say product local, and I go for get products. Let's have a look. It will fetch me the products. All right, so let's have a look. Yep, this is my product that I've just used, that I just created. So, okay, so that was add product. See, very simple, very straight, basic. Now let's have a look at Atlassian, because this was the one that I was very interested in. See if I can get it to work. So I have Atlassian here. Now we're gonna hit start. It's up and running, it's all good. And I have created a bug. So if I go on my Jira board, which is this one, I have created a bug here that says it looks like we are able to add products with negative price. This should not be allowed. All right, so let me delete this. I forgot to delete it. Okay, right. So let's just copy this title and go back to our AI and say like this: use Atlassian. Use Atlassian. Find this bug. Just put in quotes. Create a test to reproduce it. Run the test. Check it fails. Fix the code. Then run the test again. Make sure, run the test again. The tests should pass. Okay, let's see if it works. All right. So the first attempt failed. Okay, resources. Okay, it found the bug. Right. Okay, cool. Fine. So products can be of negative price, which should not be allowed. Okay. Now it's looking at the code to understand current implementation. Okay. Check if there are existing tests. It's creating a test file to verify it fails. As you can see, forgot to mention I'm using the model Sonnet 4.5. Yeah, from experience, this is the one I most rely on when it comes to code. Okay, so we have 2 tails that pass, 3 that fail. Now it's gonna fix the code. And then it's gonna, yep, run the test again, then we'll pass. And even the cool feature that I found is automatically add comments to the task in Jira. So with what has been done. Okay, so if we have a look at, yep, that's complete success. We go back to our Jira board. And yeah, bug fix, what was done, what was created, changes made, test results. It's pretty, I think it's pretty useful feature. And you can combine it with other MCP. We'll have a look at MCP resources shortly and dictate how the code should look like and all this. Tell the AI what, if you have a massive code base, you can tell the AI, this is my documentation on how my code is structured, where you can find this functionality, where you can find this functionality, and so on. So you can really go wild with this. Okay, so going back to our presentation, the next part is, oops, there you go. The next part is resources. Okay, now we've just added a product without any additional resources. Now let's see what happens when we include resources. Now, it took me a while to get my head around what's the difference between an MCP tool and an MCP resource. And the way to think of it, an MCP tool provides AI a way of doing an action, while an MCP resource, it gives files to an AI. So if we have a look here, when you're adding a context, you can choose MCP resources. And in our product local, I have a product description guideline. So I choose this resource, and if we can click on it, there's instructions on how to add description to a product. So if we say again, product-local, add ASUS, $400, use not great condition. See what it generates now. Okay. Okay. All right, so what it generated here? Let's have a look. So used laptop is not in great condition, may show signs of wear and cosmetic damage. I was hoping for more, but that's good enough. Yeah, let's give it another example. So let's say for used, it's an i7 and 5 GB of RAM. Let's see if that's a better job. Okay, used Asus laptop. Okay, display shows solid performance for everyday computing tasks and blah blah blah. Ideal for students. Okay, so it's coming up with a lot more description. Okay, so now this was one example of how to use an MCP resource. There's another example though, which is very interesting, and I don't know if you guys noticed before, but if you say product local, yeah, and then you say browse, it's one of the tools, browse products. Right. You will see here that it returns me couple of couple of links. These are links. These are not actual products. There's no data here unless I click on it. That's when it's going to go and fetch the data and I can actually show. So if I bring this here, look, I click on it. Sorry, the window went in there. Yeah, so you can see just now it went in for each product with that specific ID. And this is very important. So all of this has a context window of, I believe it's maximum 200,000 tokens. Now, if we have a look at the debug here, right? And if we scroll down, at the moment I'm on 41,000 tokens, right? Now, what happens is this is another scenario where this MCP resource is very important. If I was to fetch all this data, and if I was to fetch all these JSONs at the same, all of the products at the same time, those would have increased dramatically 5 times more the number of tokens that I'm using. And you don't want to do that because you're paying for the amount of tokens. That's what you're paying for. So this is another good scenario where when you know that your tool is going to return a massive amount of data, try to group that data. And if the user can select it, that's perfect. I had some scenarios at my workplace, but I'm not allowed to, divulge. Anyway, so this is how, this is another MCP way of how you can use MCP resources. Okay, so the last part is MCP prompts. Let's see how we can use MCP prompts. Now, MCP prompts is a way of, if you just released an MCP and you think your users might not know how to use your MCP, this is where it becomes useful. So I've created a prompt and the tool will show you there is a prompt available. We've seen before. So we have 5 tools, 1 prompt. Not sure why it doesn't show the resources, but anyway. So we have 5 tools, 1 prompts. The way to fetch the prompts is you go like this, and this is my prompt here, which is write product description. So you just press enter and it automatically fills up the prompt window with steps that to do in order to fulfill a task. So for this one is your product description writer, using the product description guidelines, write a compelling description for this product. Apparently there's supposed to be a window where you can put an input, but I think that's broken. And VS Code, I have the latest version, I don't know. Then follow these steps, review the product details, read the product description guidelines, write a description that highlights benefits, make sure it's between 50 and 150 words, and update the product with this new description. Okay, so hit enter. And let's see what it does. All right, so it's going to go fetch the product with ID 3, which is good. And then it's creating a beautiful description here. And then it's trying to update the product as Yeah, as described before. Cool. And that's it. So it updated the product. And if we go and say browse products and check product number 3. Yep. And we can see the description here. Veggie typing experience, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is pretty much it. In terms of demo wise, good to know. So I've got stuck a little bit on how to clear cache of an MCP server. I should say MCP client in Visual Studio Code. When I was trying to change the client ID of this MCP client, it just wouldn't pick it up. And just by accident, I've managed to find out that there's this option here where you can delete. This is how you delete the cache of an MCP if you wanna restart it. So it's good to know. So you don't get bugged like I did. That's it. If you have any Q&A in the chat, but that's pretty much it from my side. If not, thank you very much for joining. Hopefully this was useful and you've learned something today. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right.